So we are joined by Eric Holmberg-Weidler. He's one of the designers for Professions in Dragonflight. I want to thank you for coming. And just a reminder to you and the rest of the audience, I have a lot of nervous energy. So I'm going to just kind of read through questions, do my best to listen, and try to do follow-ups. And are we ready to go? Shall we get to it?
Let's do it. Yeah, happy to be here.
All right, very cool. So let's first talk about just things that didn't quite make it. So archaeology didn't make it into Dragonflight, although we do have these activities like rock climbing and digging for stuff. So could you tell us why it didn't make it, and maybe tease us on what your possible future vision of it is, if anything?
So archaeology is absolutely like a very cool, I'll kind of call it a profession that seems like it would match well with Dragonflight. It's this giant world that you can explore, lots of history, stuff like that. So I think it would be a great match. And I think we can look forward to something cool there. The main reason it's not there right now is we really wanted to focus on the primary professions with this refresh of professions. So that meant we just wanted to focus on those main ones, which meant that we had to go a little lighter on things like cooking and fishing, as well as archaeology in this case.
Yeah,
But
yeah, because yeah, I'm sorry for cutting in, but yeah, about fishing and cooking, because I'm thinking of things like the fishing artifact or like the way of the walk, the way of the grill that we had in Miss Pandaria. So I guess those things were not very high priority. Is that kind of what we're getting with secondary professions at least?
so I mean, it was a matter of we wanted to make sure each of the primary professions really shined, and you can't leave out one of the primary professions, right?
Right.
So we focused to make sure that those are all super awesome. That said, fishing and cooking, while they don't have specializations this time around, they do have a whole bunch of really cool world connections there. Um, there's a whole stew pot quest line you can do, and there's all these different types of ways you can fish with spears and things like that, as well as a couple of other ways to progress. So like we actually kind of took them in a different direction, and there's a separate team, the content team, that's all about making awesome stuff out in the world, and they took on a bit of that work and added a bunch of really awesome stuff to fishing and cooking for this time around.
Yeah, I can't wait to dive into that stuff. So let me talk about one of my favorite professions right now, Inscription. So Inscription has some really cool customization kind of stuff with dragon riding customizations. There's a ton of stuff that's been added. Although there's a lot of folks that have been clamoring for good old spell customizations, being able to get like Seal of Blood, those kinds of effects. But more so, like during Battle for Azeroth and Shadowlands, while there were some glyphs that were added, it was kind of a drip feed, and overall, I guess not all classes were made equal when it came to glyph making or spell customization. So, is there any hopes of improvements on that front in the future?
So glyphs are definitely an area that are really exciting and fun to play with. I look back on those days when there was the full glyph system for Inscription really fondly. More recently, the reason we've steered a little bit away from like the really heavy combat spell glyphing is to make sure that every class can sort of deliver on its identity. And if we're talking like PvP or something like that, to make sure that the spells are really recognizable and things like that. And so being able to customize all those in a really heavy way makes all of that a little bit harder. So no specific plans right now, but we definitely hear and agree that being able to customize different types of spells with glyphs is really fun. So I think it's something that we'll continue to look into and hopefully find some other ways to do it.
That's actually an interesting angle. I didn't really think about how it would affect PvP and how some person might see some effect and be like, "Oh, that's nothing," and then all of a sudden, "Oh my God, that's totally something." And so that's kind of that's definitely an angle that I didn't really consider. Um, I guess last thing on this side of things so far is WoW has been really pushing transmog stuff, and that's been great. I love collecting transmog. I'm a big fan of that. For example, the Covenant sets with the four color tints, the Maw shoulders. There's like a bajillion of those. But the way that some of those are being distributed are rep grinding things like that. Is there any chance or any thoughts on professions taking a bite out of that and just having pure cosmetic things that are made via professions?
Absolutely. I mean, it's something that's been done in the past, and we absolutely want to do in the future. It's super satisfying to learn a rare recipe, find a bunch of crazy reagents, to do with a crafting order now, to get some kind of rare transmog. That's definitely something that we'll be doing more of in the future.
All right, cool. So let's talk about Endgame because I'm sure that folks are cutting through the VOD trying to find the Endgame stuff. Can you talk us through, not in as briskly as possible, kind of the experience of obtaining the major bind-on pickup reagents, and by that I'm talking about the Sparks of Ingenuity, the Primal infusions, or the Primal focuses, and by that I'm talking about like the timing or the cadence at which we'll get these, and then I'll have a little bit more on that. But yeah, let's start on like how often or how long does it take to get these?
Totally. Happy to. But before I do that, just to like quickly go a little bit into the goals for those things.
Okay.
Um, the desire is that profession gear is sort of a major gear source. And we've always wanted professions to be able to make powerful gear. And we were kind of in this catch-22 before, where like if the profession could make it, but it was soul bound, then you had to be that profession to be able to craft that gear, right? So it's very cool for a blacksmith to be able to make high-end plate, but if we say to be the best warrior, you have to be a blacksmith, and that doesn't feel as good as being able to choose a profession because that's the profession you're excited about. So that way to do it is not ideal. And then on the other side, we could have profession gear that's not bound and can be sold on the auction house. And we've done that in the past too. Problem with that is if we have too much of it, then you can just use gold to gear out, and that can kind of undermine progression from other systems and things like that. So with the introduction of crafting orders and this new system that I'll get into in a second, we've sort of given ourselves this third method of gearing, right? Where we can ask every player to go out and get gear, and we can make sure that everyone can. And then even if you're not a crafter, you can then make a crafting order to get someone to make it for you. So we want professions to be a major gearing source. And at the same time, we don't want it to take over or anything like that, right? Like we want you to, if you're outside, you do spend time working on your factions and finding treasures and all the other fun things that you do if you're doing a raid or a mythic plus or PvPing. Those activities should be your primary source of gear. So we want professions to sort of insert in there and be this extra source that helps. So given that, there's sort of three major things that you need for your profession gear beyond just like the tradable reagents. As you mentioned, there's the Spark of Ingenuity. So there's this really cool quest where you learn about and unlock the Engine of Innovation, which is sort of an old Titan artifact that allows you to craft these sparks. And you'll be able to do that quest sort of as soon as you unlock other endgame quests. So play through the campaign and all that stuff, and you'll be able to do that first one. That'll give you one Spark of Ingenuity, which translates to one piece of profession gear if you get all the other reagents. The second stage of that quest will unlock with the season start. So as soon as the raids open and everything else, you'll be able to get a second one. And then they basically unlock every 2 weeks after that until you have 5. So you'll get 5 Sparks of Ingenuity from that quest line. At that point, you unlock the ability to discover bottled essences out in the world. And these are the things that you feed into the engine to create additional sparks. And those bottled essences are sort of a rare drop that you can get from whatever you're doing, basically. Tuned to be expectation depending on how much you play and how lucky you are. You might get one once every 2 weeks or so. If you're unlucky, it'll sort of increase the chance over time. They're modeled similarly to Legion legendaries, with the sort of,
Rubber
part of
banding,
the
I
problem with Legion
guess.
Legend. Sorry, what was that?
Like rubber banding, like you get bad luck protection, kind
Yeah,
of.
there's a little bit of that. I always love the feeling of like whatever I'm doing, there's always a chance of getting something awesome, right? I could always get. On the other hand, like the problem with Legion, the only issue with Legion Ledger is maybe not the only one, but one that I think we solve here is if the wrong one drops, you're like, well, crap, and there's nothing I can do about that,
Yeah,
right? You get
yeah,
unlucky, and then you're a little unhappy. In this case, you get your spark, and you can turn into whatever you want.
right.
So we kind of dodge that problem, but we still have the fun of like, whatever I do, I might get something cool. So you need your spark. One spark for most profession gear. You need two for two-handed weapons because
Yeah,
they take up two slots basically. And then you'll need Primal Chaos. Primal Chaos is something that kind of drops everywhere, all end game activities, whether you're outside, doing difficult world bosses or world quests or storms, that kind of thing. And anytime you complete like a Mythic Plus or a Heroic dungeon, any dungeon really, you'll get some. You get it from raiding, throwing bosses. You get it from PvP. All the sources. Basically, the goal being that everyone, no matter what activity you do, you can get your hands on some of the stuff and craft some profession gear that's sort of comparable to whatever your activity is. That's all you really need, other than tradable reagents, to get the first stage of the high-end crafted gear. If you want access to a optional reagent, a primal infusion, or a concentrated primal infusion, which will upgrade that gear to either heroic raid or mythic raid item level, then in general, you need to do an activity that's sort of comparable to that. So every heroic boss, for instance, will drop a primal focus. You need 10 plus some primal chaos to make a primal infusion, which lets you upgrade one piece. You can also get it from Mythic Plus, I think it's 11 or higher, or if you're suitably high in rated PvP, then you can get them. And then the same thing goes for the concentrated primal focus, which is for sort of the mythic tier of the same thing. And again, you need 10 to make the optional reagent to upgrade them.
And these are from raids. These foci, these are guaranteed when you defeat like a raid boss, or when you when you complete a dungeon at a certain level,
Mythic.
it's a guaranteed thing.
Yep, exactly. Like you'll always get one from Mythic Plus, 11 plus, and you'll always get one from every like heroic boss you kill, for instance. Similarly,
Okay.
if you get a gold box from PvP at the right rating, you'll get one as well.
Okay. Okay. Great. That's incredibly helpful information. Thank you. Now, can crafted gear, like higher end crafted gear, is that going to be eligible for use with the upcoming Inspiration Catalyst?
So it is not. And if you're wondering why it's not, then there's a few reasons. One, there are a lot of other sources for it, right? There's both Storm gear and of course Mythic Plus gear and all that stuff. So there's a lot of sources to get it. The main reason though is crafted gear is pretty mutable with the recrafting system that we've added, where you can actually change out the optional reagents. You can recraft it to raise the quality. Let's say it's a normal raid tier piece. If you go and do a heroic raid and earn enough of the primal focuses, you can upgrade it to heroic. So it's like because it's very mutable and can be changed and upgraded and stuff like that. And it's built from these limited reagents. We didn't want players falling into the trap of being like, oh, I should just convert this thing in with the catalyst into my set piece, and then I kind of lose advantage of having that piece of gear. And it would be kind of a destructive action because once it's been converted, recrafting it, quality, all those things don't make as much sense anymore.
Okay. Okay. That sounds cool. Okay. Not cool, but there's the answer, guys. Now, going back to Primal Infusions really quick, I noticed that at the end of each of the 4 renown tracks that you can get one, and that's kind of cool. Now, when it comes to solo players, people who don't do any of this group content, are those primal infusions going to be like, is that it? Is that all they're going to have that sort of access to? And how is that going to translate in later seasons? Are they just not going to get anything either? Like after that, because they might have their renown maxed out after that point.
So this is definitely an experiment. We think that it's really fun to be able to get gear that is higher than sort of the activity that you're normally doing. So this felt like a great way to give players some access to sort of heroic tier gear without having it be completely unlimited. So it's meant to be a satisfying thing to work towards, basically. There's actually a fifth one, I believe, that you can get for killing Razageth the first time. So if you do LFR, for instance, once all the wings have opened, you kill Razageth, you can get a fifth one. So that's 5 pieces of heroic gear, which is quite a bit.
Okay. As a quick comment, you don't have to answer this part, but if I guess it might be kind of satisfying if, say, the Paragon chest that you would get after you max out your renown would have like some small chance of having an infusion there too, just to give those kinds of world content players like a little bit something further to push for if they happen to satisfy their requirements for the season. And it's like, oh, I want something to do, but I just wanted to.
I think that's definitely a cool idea. And with this being an all new system, we kind of want to see where it shakes out. You were asking about the next season, and we're still trying to figure out exactly how that's going to translate. But the general intention is that you'll be able to continue to use that existing profession gear and probably upgrade it to be competitive in the next season, as well as we'll likely be introducing new recipes as well. So you might craft your own next season version of something that's thematic to that season as well.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of where I was jumping in next. Like, so you guys aren't too sure right now whether you're going to say, "Hey, here's a new thing to recraft our existing gear," versus, "Okay, here's a brand new recipe. Good luck." So
I think we'll do both. Like, there's a lot of recipes that we made in 10.0, and players are going to spend in Dragonflight, and players are going to spend a lot of time earning those recipes and specializing to get good at crafting them and things like that. We wouldn't want to undermine any of that. So I think all those recipes will continue to be relevant. It's just, we might also introduce some new ones, and then players will be able to pick, do I want to craft something new, or do I want to try to upgrade one of my existing pieces?
So by the time we get to season 2, we're going to have we're going to have a more mature market in terms of like resources, gathered materials, and things like that. With season 2 and beyond, are you guys also thinking about adding like new materials, or like, hey, here's a new herb node or something, or okay, you're going to gather the same herb nodes, but now there's like new stuff that you get from it in order to kind of counterbalance everything that people might have been gathering during season 1?
Still trying to figure that out. Like, I think if thematically it makes sense, we might add some new reagents. Again, we sort of have to balance it with existing specializations and existing recipes and stuff. If you add a new recipe that uses a new reagent, then everyone wants that new reagent for that new thing. We don't want to invalidate any of the old ones. So it's a balance. I mean, if you look back at like 9.2, we added one new ore and one new herb and stuff like that, and a set of recipes that use that. So I think I think there are cases where it definitely makes sense, and we'll be looking to add some new reagents without throwing out of whack the existing economy.
Okay, cool. Specializations, I love them. They're great. But there are a lot of folks that are really antsy about, ooh, I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to mess up. And right now, there's no opportunity to respecialize these points as far as I've seen. Could you kind of explain the philosophy behind that? Or is there a surprise? Oh, you can respec.
No surprise. The philosophy is basically you can eventually fill out that whole specialization. There's more than enough knowledge in the world between sort of one-time sources, like first time you craft a recipe, and repeatable sources, be they world quests or weekly quests and things like that, to eventually, over the course of the expansion, get everything. We're not really intending most people to do that, but design wise, the way I tend to think of it is if you know that you can, then it tends to change your calculus a little bit and be like, well, I'm making this decision and maybe it's not the perfect decision, but I can always fix it later, right? Because I always get more points to solve. So the idea is basically allowing you to specialize without respecing really helps us lean into the identity and the fantasy of the profession. Like if you respec, if it's too easy to respec, for instance, you lose some of that identity. Like, am I a helmsmith? Well, I was today, but now I'm something completely different.
Okay.
So there's that side of it, and there are many progression systems where respecing works very well. For instance, just classes. It's great to be able to respec your class for Mythic Plus or for any of those other things. I don't think that takes away from the system in any way, shape, or form. But for professions, we really wanted to lean into that fantasy. The other thing is just on the economy side, like making a choice and devoting yourself to it can have a pretty big impact on sort of your ability to make money. And you might get lucky or make a really smart decision and find a niche that is very successful. And if someone could just respec into that later, then that decision wouldn't mean as much, right? Like everyone will all of a sudden just undermine you because you made the smart thing and then everyone just respect into it. I think it makes it a more interesting sort of economy if you can't do that for the time being, at least.
All right. So some people aren't going to be here day one of Dragonflight. They're going to come in months late, seasons late. What's going to compel them to jump in knowing that they're going to be behind? Is there going to be some sort of like way for like newer players to like catch up? Is there anything like that that's going to happen for Dragonflight?
So the idea is it's kind of built into the way the system works. And let me explain what I mean by that. One, there's a lot of front-loaded knowledge that you can gain, right? Like if the first time you craft every recipe, for instance, you gain a knowledge point. So that means you can get, depending on the profession, there's like 100 to 200 knowledge that have sort of these one-time sources. And if you rush towards them, then you can get this big jump of like a bunch of knowledge really up front. And then after that, yes, you're slowed down by sort of repeatable games that take a little longer. The thing is, you don't need to be good at everything to be successful as a crafter, right? If you find your niche, if you decide you want to become a chronocloth tailor, for instance, you don't actually need that much specialization to become really good at chronocloth. If you want to be good at chronocloth and every type of every slot and also Azure Weave, then you need to spend a lot of time. But like if you just pick your niche and go for that, you can actually make some of the best stuff pretty quickly, even if you're way behind someone who can do a bunch more things. As long as you can do something well, I think that's valuable. That's interesting. That's cool for the fantasy. The other thing is, like, even if you're not the best, like that may not be it may not be immensely profitable, but you can be super valuable for your group, right? You can help your guild out. You can craft awesome stuff for yourself. And in a lot of cases, you actually don't need to sort of, again, get every single point from every single thing to craft something at max quality. If it's not, say, mythic level with every optional reagent and every other thing. So like if you're out there to say craft normal raid gear for people, which a lot more people will be looking for, I think, than mythic raid gear. So there's just more people that not that many people do mythic raids and really high on Mythic Plus compared to the wider audience, right? So that's a big audience too. So you could make money and be competitive there, again, without needing to be sort of on the cutting edge of the person who's gained the most knowledge for their profession.
Okay, cool. Do you think, or when will we get, this is straight up a demand now, when will we get crafting orders for old world recipes, that sort of stuff?
I don't have a specific date for you, but we absolutely want to do that. Totally see it. Like there's a huge amount of value in like this old random thing that like not that many people know how to craft. And you don't see it on the auction house. very often, but you can throw up a crafting order and put a bunch of gold on it, and then word's going to get around, and somebody who can actually craft it will want to do it for you. So we think that's a really valuable aspect to the system. So we're going to be looking into that sort of as soon as we can to get that. And then I hope to see it. I can't promise it, but I hope to see it sometime fairly early in the patch cycle for Dragonflight.
All right, cool. So he totally promised, folks. Totally 100% promised.
That's what I said.
Okay, so we'll try to get through a couple more real quick. So crafting orders right now, we can do up to 10 a day, and it kind of banks at 30 for those who aren't like really on top of that right now. But there are some folks on small servers with smaller communities that say, oh, that's way too many, because among the fewer people who are there, there's going to be a lot of competition. But other people from large servers are saying, oh, dude, that's not enough. I'm not going to be able to do nearly as many. I'm going to have to pick and choose. And, there's some goods and bads to both. Do you think that, or do you agree that those are potential issues? And if so, are there any like knobs or like advanced solutions that you guys are thinking of?
So we're definitely still tweaking those numbers. I actually think there's a change that'll be coming that slightly lowers that after looking at potential problems there. Like, we do want it to be kind of competitive. Like, the hope would be that if you really want your public crafting order filled quickly, that you give a decent commission so that those crafters can make some money off of that. And keeping that number a little bit tighter helps that, right? Because if it's more limited, then there's more competition for those limited numbers of crafts that people can do, which means that, yeah, if you want it quickly, then you'll pay a commission. That said, there's this backstop to the whole system, right? Which is anything that's about to expire. I want to say it's like 2 hours. I'm not totally sure what the number is we landed on. Where anything that's sort of close to expiring, you can craft without limit, basically. So you can fill a public order that's about to expire. It's not going to take away from your limited number that you can fill, and so anyone can choose to do it. In cases like that, in certain circumstances, I would imagine people are willing to even do it for a silver commission, because it's an opportunity to gain some skill, right? If it's a higher end craft, right? So, so that creates, hopefully, this ecosystem where both works. The rich and impatient player will pay a lot, and crafters can make a bunch of gold doing that. And then if you're either don't care, you're patient, you don't have a lot of gold, you don't want to spend a lot of gold, you can still get your stuff made. We really want to see most of the crafting orders be filled. So hopefully those two things together means, even if the number's not perfect for any given realm, that it kind of works itself out. Meanwhile, we'll be keeping an eye on this and listening to player feedback as well, and making adjustments as necessary.
Okay. Do we have time for one more, or is that it for us?
I'm fine on time. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, you can do one more.
Yes. Okay. So, I guess this is the last one. So basic materials right now, those are available on the region-wide auction house. I find it, personal opinion, I find it a little bit inconsistent that public orders are not region-wide. Can you explain the decision as to why that is so?
Yeah, totally. So this is a brand new system. We don't know how it's gonna kind of work itself out, right? So we wanted to start a little bit conservative there, keeping it on the realm on a realm basis. Kind of limits how that works. It's consistent with part of the auction house, right? Because the part that's not commodities are limited to your realm still. So it's consistent there, and we basically wanted to start it there, both to see how that feels, because we could always go wider later, but you can't really go back in the other direction, right? Once you're more allowing, you can't be less allowing. That would make everyone pretty unhappy. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is really trying to satisfy this goal of fantasy, of being able to feel like you are the best scribe, or the best tailor in your realm. And that's a lot easier if the order system is limited to that realm, because you're not competing against the rest of the region and however many millions of crafters there might be out there trying to do it as well. So it can help you stand out and be cooler. And then the final thing is, like, the hope is that like as a public crafter, you might actually be trying to sort of build this audience, build this customer base, right? So like maybe you do a couple of recrafts to get inspiration to like craft something at a higher quality than someone might have expected otherwise. Like you don't need to deliver something at quality 5, but maybe you take the effort to do that for someone. And then in your message, you're like, hey, like next time you need your engineering needs met, come to me, right? Like, and that's also a little easier when it's like smaller scale, right? And if there was a world where like public orders were region wide, but then the other ones weren't, then like the chance that a person that you're filling an order for is actually on your realm is pretty low. So that would be a lot harder to do. With it all being consistent, it should be easier to sort of gather those customers. So hopefully that kind of thing is what ends up happening. We love the social aspect. We love the community aspect. Professions really lean into that, and we want to help that happen as much as possible.
All right, yeah, I'm looking forward to like this whole delivery. Like right now, I'm loving it. There's a lot of cool stuff to look forward to, and I think that's about a wrap for us, right? So, I want to thank you, Eric, and I want to thank the rest of the PR team for honoring me with being able to do this interview. I thought we got a lot of good information out of this, and I'm grateful that that you guys chose me to be a part of this. Thank you.